Hi friends, today we're going to be talking about how to track your sales team's performance. Tracking your sales team performance can really be your friend if you understand why and how tracking is done. So today in this video, I'm going to be talking about how tracking a sales team's performance can determine the success of your team and give you some vital information that'll instantly improve your sales team's performance. So let's talk tracking performance. Performance tracking doesn't sound very exciting, does it? It's the topic most sales guys don't want to talk about. They say, just let me do my art. I'm an artist. Let me just create. Ironically, understanding the metrics can take a good team to become a great team. And of course, we want to be great. So let's spend the next few minutes into what metrics are and specifically what metrics drive a sales team's performance. We will also know why tracking performance matters, and I'll give you some real-world examples I've used that have helped take our sales team performance from 0 to hero. If you're ready, let's go. So why is tracking sales performance so important, and how does it work in the sales world? Honestly, tracking performance and tracking certain metrics in a sales organization really is the lifeblood of a sales organization. It's what makes it go. Let's take an iceberg, for example. This is a great analogy for tracking performance metrics, right? Typically, all you see is the top part of it, right? It might be good, it might not be so great, but the story really lies underneath the surface. And that's where tracking performance and metrics come into play. So as in the iceberg example, what you see above the water is just the end result, but what's telling the whole story is everything that lies under the surface. And that's what we really need to dive into and figure out. One of the quotes I love goes like this: where performance is measured and performance is reported back and tracked, performance improves. So think about it. If we don't track performance, what happens? How do we know if it's improved? How do we know if it's gotten worse? So being able to track that and follow up is where we're going to see performance improve. I remember this really hit home to me many years ago when I read a book, and it's not a real popular book, but as an organization, probably about 15, 20 years ago, we read this book. It was called It's Not the Big That Eat the Small, but the Fast That Eat the Slow. Now in there was a story of a business. It was a pizza franchise in Spain. Now when this individual started his franchise, he had the metrics down to a science. He knew that if he went door to door and delivered a flyer to X amount of doors, it would yield X amount of calls. He knew that X amount of calls would yield X amount of orders. He knew that X amount of orders would yield X amount of revenue. So he had it down to a science where he tracked the performance indicators, and by tracking that, he could predict what his sales would be. So that franchise became very successful in Spain because he had a formula that he could pass on to the next franchise, that if they followed that system, they knew they could see success. And that's really where we want to get to, is we can track those metrics so well, we know what's going to happen. And think about it. Metrics are like keeping score of a game. Can you imagine a game where there's no score, where there's no statistics? Imagine watching a basketball game and people are scoring, but there's no scoreboard. You don't see who scored. You don't see who fouled. You don't see how many fouls this person has. You don't see how many assists, rebounds, whatever it might be. Going to a game where they don't track that stuff would be pretty boring. And sales is the exact same way. If there's no scoreboard, we're not going to know what's going on. There's no way we can correct any issues that might come about. Another important point when it comes to tracking performance is metrics and how they determine success and why. Broken down to its basic core, the metrics are the scorecard. I remember another story of an organization that thought they were going to be super innovative. They were going to get rid of any type of metrics, any type of scoreboard, any type of scorecard. And what happened? What do you think happened? Of course, this organization ended up failing miserably because nothing was tracked. Nobody knew what was going on. And they thought, well, people don't want to be maybe offended or hurt by tracking metrics. It just doesn't work that way. The business world isn't set up to do that. We've got to be able to track something so we know where we can improve. Now, an important metric in tracking your sales performance is conversion rate. That might be the biggest one of all. But before I dive into that, I want to talk about an underlying metric that we've used in our business that have helped tell the real story. Now, one of the metrics we use in our organization is phone time and dials. We know that if a sales rep is on the phone a certain amount of hours each day, and his dials are a certain amount every single day, that's going to yield success. And we can almost verbatim go look at every sales rep, and the ones that are performing have those metrics in line. If they don't, there's a challenge. But besides that, if they were misaligned, it would tell a story on how we needed to train those individuals. For example, We had somebody who had very low dials, but lots of phone time. We knew that that individual was giving way too much information. And when they had the high phone time and low dials, and then we're getting in sales, we knew that the person was saying, okay, I've got all the information from this individual. I don't need anything else. I'm on my way. Whereas the other side of the coin, if somebody had lots of dials, but very low phone time, then we knew that that person was saying something in the initial part of his call that was turning people off, right? People were wanting to get off the phone with that individual as quick as they could because they didn't like his cadence, how fast he spoke, whatever it might have been. But we knew we needed to train that individual on that initial, probably first 60 seconds, 120 seconds of the call to get people to stay. And as we worked on those things and started to even those things out, guess what we saw? Sales come into the organization. You know, one funny story, we had a guy that worked for us for a long time. We called him One Call That All. It's funny, we called him One Call That's All, right? Because he was the anomaly. He was one individual that could make very few calls and get lots of sales. His phone time would be very high, but his dials would be like 5, 6, but he'd still get sales. And it was an anomaly. So we called him Mr. One Call That's All because that's all it took for him to get a sale. But most of the time that typically doesn't happen. Now, as I mentioned, one of the key indicators to determine sales performance is the metric conversion rate. Now, conversion rate is interesting, right? I think most people look at that and say, well, conversion rate's pretty simple. It's your prospects divided by how many closed, and that's going to give you a conversion rate. Now, think about that for a second. There's other factors going to that. If you have a certain amount of leads that you're dialing or getting a hold of, or a certain amount of prospects, there's going to be a contact rate in there, right? So a contact rate is how many of those people you actually contact do you make contact with. And some people will measure the conversion rate based off of the contacts. Now that's obviously going to make the conversion rate look better. That might be what we want, right? We want to see out of how many people you talk to, how many of them do you close? How many of them become a sale? And that might determine if this person's better at just sales or if this person's better at contacting somebody, right? So conversion rate really is an important metric. Now, an organization where we do high-end coaching sales, our conversion rates might be a little bit lower because you're taking somebody from, hey, I'm just talking to you the first time, to here's a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 program to help you in one of these different areas that you're interested in. Now, our conversion rates might be a little bit lower than somebody who's maybe selling a $100 program, right? You know, XYZ that maybe costs a certain amount of dollars every single month. Now, with us, a conversion rate is going to be lower. But one thing we found in an organization that really helps us determine the true skill set of a sales representative and tracking their performance is what we call dollar per lead, right? Because follow me here, watch this. Say you have two sales individuals. One of them, let's say they have a 4% close rate, right? And this person only has a 2% close rate. Well, this person's 2 times better, typically, if you look at just those metrics, than this individual. However, let's say this person's sales was, let's say he had 4 sales, one for 1,000, one for 1,500, one for 2,000, one for 1,000, right? And so all of a sudden you got somebody with $5,500 in sales, right? But this person had 2 sales. Let's say that one was $7,000 and one was $8,000. This person did almost 3 times as much volume as this individual. Now, if you just measured them by strictly conversion rate, you would make the assumption that this individual is going to bring more revenue into your company. Now, don't get me wrong, it's important, super important to be able to convert those individuals into sales because eventually his sales might be bigger. But if this person's converting those individuals, he might also see more sales down the road when he's seeing those big wins, right? And so a dollar per lead will take the dollar amount that the individual brought into the organization or the dollar amount that the sales team brought in the organization divided by the number of sales they received and give you a dollar per lead. So let's say there's an individual who had 100 leads. Now they definitely don't get that many, but just to make the numbers easy, and they brought in $10,000. Their dollar per lead is $100 a lead. And typically we'd like somebody to be at least $150, $200 a lead. And on some of the best leads, we're almost double that. But that tells a little bit more of a story because it encompasses not just conversion rate, but also dollar amount. And so measuring a team's performance can really be something that can go down to the granular level and be specific for you and your organization. Now, those are some things that we've used in our organization. I'd be interested to see what you've done in yours. So please feel free to comment, leave me some feedback. I'd love to engage in a dialogue with you. And as always, I've got a free gift for you, aaronsSalesTraining.com. It's 20 of our best modules on persuasion and influence that will help your organization. Whether you're in sales or personal, professional development, these modules will help you grow not only in your sales skills, but professionally as well. So once again, thanks for stopping by, watching the videos. Have an awesome day.